Hey team, welcome back to the channel. I want to go over our post-market movers. Today we have ticker UIHC at the lead gapper, up 72% at its current price of $2.85. We also have MDXH, CXAI, and I want to go over ticker GNS as well, as you guys can see on the chart. So let's go over UIHC first, because I think that's the big winner in the aftermarket. Called this one out really early in our Discord, as well as in Benzinga Pro in the chat rooms. Was mentioning that this one was starting to test that $2 level, which was right about here, which was not a major level on my chart, but it was a whole dollar test, which we know is a key level in itself, a mental level. It closed over, and it did it paired with volume. You can see the first candle to close over this level was this yellow candle, letting us know that there was volume there. It wasn't extremely high volume, so it was pretty low liquidity, but we can see that it held the level, never closed below. If I put that line back at $2, closed above, held $2, went up, hit target at $2.50. Of course, the mental level here. Then we got above that and we hit our target of $2.61, which again was a predetermined level we had on our chart. Now, we closed over the $2.61. We continued up and hit this target at $3.18. Now, we closed over the $3.18. We can see on this candle, we closed at $3.19. And I wouldn't necessarily call that a clean close. And a lot of the reason for that is if I hover over this high line, we can see these candles right here in this order are pretty much all green. And that's a bullish vertical trend. And we can see that on this indicator that we have built, bullish vertical trend spotter. And we can see that we had a major vertical trend, right? So it makes perfect sense to me why we failed this level and why we had that major red after this type of move. So if anyone was in this trade, obviously it was a great idea to start locking in some of those profits around 250, 261. It did close above right here. It got a lot of volume. That white candle lets us know it was a very bullish candle, and it was very high volume. If I hover over it, it shows 101,000 shares, which isn't extreme high volume, but in the aftermarket, that's pretty good. That's what we look for, as these breakout candles to get up there. Now, we had a major red over here, a negative 6.9% candle, which is pretty nasty. And for tomorrow specifically, guys, I don't really expect a whole lot out of this one, to be honest. I'm not sure if I'm accurate with that prediction, but what I'm seeing on the chart above is a cluster of resistance. Now, it doesn't mean it won't get through these levels above, but what it tells me is that the clean and most, attractive gaps have already filled. So really, the skin in the game, there is no more skin in the game, right? Per se. So we can see that we have a lot of levels above, and again, it could break through these levels, and that may happen. The only problem with something like that is I do anticipate a lot of resistance, a lot of choppy price action in this cluster of resistance. So therefore, I probably won't be able to find an entry in these levels. But if you're watching for bullish momentum, it has to close over 318, hold that level. It's a smaller time frame level. 333 is next, then 338, 350, or the 349, of course, and 354. So keep an eye on that. That's a cluster of resistance. Once we get above that, it kind of opens up to 363, 367, 377, 382, $4, 403. And so on and so forth, right? So if we start to get up there, maybe I could find an entry in some of these gaps. Again, if we measure these gaps to see which one is most lucrative for ourselves, this one here is about a 5% gap. So it's tough to really weigh out a possible 5% gap or potential on the trade when you're risking these type of 7% negative reds on this candle here, right? So for me, again, it may very well get into these gaps, and if so, it may be tradable for some, but it may not be tradable for myself. So that's ticker UIHC. If we start to come back down, I've got 261 and $1.01 to really watch for possible bounce plays, but I don't usually trade like that. So next one on the list, we have, let's go over GNS real quick. This one we had on the list last night as well. It didn't really get the volume that we were looking for, so we didn't take the trade on this one, or I never took a trade on it. Was mentioning that I was looking for a clean close over this 150 level to then hold that level of support. And you can see in the pre-market, this is that gray section here. We never got that volume, very low volume, and we can see low liquidity. So no volume, no trade for me. As the market opened, by this time in the market, we can see these were pretty low volume candles leading up into this close above. So for me, that's not necessarily an A+ setup on GNS. So for me, I just sit out of that type of play because, again, these candles leading up to it is really telling me a story that, yes, it's a cheapo with low volume. It has a large gap above, but it's not really bullish momentum because we're not really getting consistent volume. And so therefore, for me, this wasn't the type of trade I was looking for. So I did get the alert when it happened. It did close above, but we can see it began to get a little choppy. And we're looking for, again, these white candles to really have that breakout volume, especially during the market hours, because there's a lot of traders during this time. So GNS, same idea as yesterday. It's got to get over 150 to be considered. So that's where I'm going to set my first alert. I'll go ahead and go in here and hit save. So first alert will be there. If it hits that level, I'll start watching because I want to see a close over that level to possibly trade. Again, it will not be A+ due to the price, so I'm not sure I'm in love with the setup. But if it gets over that 165, again, we have a cleaner gap that I think I may take advantage of. Now, if we pull over to MDXH, which is another gapper that we have up, we can see that on this one, same idea. We had very little volume. So it gapped up in the aftermarket. That's this blue section you have here. And we can see that, yes, it gapped up, but it did it on such little volume that there was no, for me, no tradable entries in this type of move. So this yellow candle is the only candle with a little bit of volume, and it had 30,000 shares on it. So it's not really a whole lot of volume, but it's getting some. Now, the levels I have, if this thing gets above that smaller time frame level of 429, which is over here, again, a smaller time frame level, so it's not a major time frame level or a major weighted level in my opinion. Close above the 429, I'll start watching, so that's where I'll set my alert. I'll go ahead and just hit the alert and hit create, and then once we get to that level, I'll watch for a possible trade depending on conditions leading into. I do like the gap above, but we have to keep in mind we have 440 as the high in the aftermarket, so it's about filled the gap to $4.50. So that would be where I'd like to scale out of my position. So right about here. From there, we have a 12% gap from the 450 up to $5. So if I can get an early entry, scale into profit at 450 or around that area, and then go ahead and hold a small lotto for a bigger move, then that would be great. Now, above the 504 level, I have a large gap all the way to 685. So of course, half and whole dollar are going to come into play in this level on ticker MDXH. If we start to drop in the pre-market with this lower volume like we've seen in the aftermarket, then for me, it won't really be on the list any longer. But if it starts to drop, you can watch 350, 339, and 296, and of course, $3 being the mental whole dollar level as well. Next up, we have ticker CXAI, which we have done well on this one in the past. This was a nice 1-2 trade. This is an AI stock here. We can see that was moving with the AI names. And if we zoom in on this chart, we're going to see that we did get a pop in the aftermarket. But again, it was on low volume and low liquidity, which is kind of the theme of the low floats today. So we have CXAI needs to close over 1347. And of course, we know the mental level 1350 to really be considered bullish. Now, it can't be bullish unless it has volume, and if it doesn't have that volume, it will be a risk it for the biscuit type of setup, which are not my favorite setups to take, especially in these type of markets that we're in today. So I would be looking for high volume to close above these levels to then hold those levels as possible support, but I will not trade with large size as these are smaller time frame levels. And if we zoom out a little bit, we'll see CXAI has filled a lot of these gaps above. So these gaps I have over here, we can see it got all the way up to here to $69, $70, which is absolutely crazy, right? So I'm sure a lot of traders are thinking, hey, this might get back up to $70, but what I'm thinking is, hey, there's a lot of bags on the way up to that $70 range. So if I can get myself a 50-cent move and capture in some profits and hold a lotto for a bigger move, awesome. And if I can't, no big deal. Again, I won't trade it with large size until we get that volume and liquidity, and that's on ticker CXAI. The levels I have is, of course, $13.47 and $13.50 being the $0.50. Now, it did hit $14, $14.23. So technically speaking, it did fill the gap to $14. So really, I'd love to see this get some volume over that $14 level, hold that level of support, and grind up to $14.50, $15, and $15.40 being the smaller time frame above that. Then I have $15.50, $16, half and whole dollar, all the way up to $17.53. Close above that level, we have a nice gap up to 21. Now, again, if we measure these gaps, let's go ahead and measure this one here. We've got 13% there. That's not bad, right? we've got 13% there as well. So again, not a bad idea depending on the conditions leading into. And this is an 18% gap. So maybe that's the most favorable gap that I see on that chart. But again, these are smaller time frame levels. They're not going to hold as much weight. And this was low liquidity, very low volume. So number one rule for myself, no volume, no trade. And if I do take trades with low volume, I will greatly reduce my size, tighten up my stop loss, and or possibly avoid the trade altogether. So guys, that's it. Ticker UIHC GNS, MDXH, and of course CXAI. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.